Welcome to Lost at Sea Tales. Tonight we journey into one of the most haunting mysteries of our time. Modern aircraft, 239 souls, and a disappearance so complete that it seemed to defy the very limits of technology. The story of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 is more than a tragedy. It is a riddle carved into the sky, a silence stretching across oceans, and a search that pushed humanity to the edge of its understanding. In the next hours, I invite you to sit back, dim the lights, and let the darkness settle around you. Atmospheric exploration of an event that has captivated the world for over a decade. A story where every clue leads to more questions, and every answer slips further beneath the waves. And this is the Lost Flight. This is the mystery that refuses to fade. This is MH370. Thank you for joining me on this long descent into one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. The silence before the sky on nights like this, the world feels wider than usual. Airports hum like restless cities made of metal, glass, and fluorescent light, cutting through the darkness while the sky above stretches like an endless void over the oceans of the earth. It is the night of March 7th, 2014, slipping quietly into the morning of the 8th. In Kuala Lumpur, the air is thick and warm, still holding the scent of a rainstorm that threatened but never came. Passengers gather in the bright glow of Gate C1, waiting to board Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 to Beijing. There are no alarms, no warnings, nothing unusual. This night seems like any other, but sometimes the most ordinary nights hold the darkest secrets. The airport feels suspended between silence and motion, luggage wheels tap rhythmically against polished floors, their echoes drifting like faint knocks on the hull of some great ship. Conversations blur into a low, indistinct murmur. Overhead announcements fade in and drift away again, just fragments of words swallowed by the vast, sleepless terminal. Through the wide glass windows, MH370 waits on the tarmac. Its white fuselage glows under the floodlights, the red and blue stripes of Malaysia Airlines shimmering faintly against the night. It sits motionless, its engines quiet, as if holding its breath. People gather their belongings, straighten their clothes, glance at their phones. Some shift their weight impatiently. Others yawn, feeling the late hours settle heavily on their shoulders. One by one, they will walk down the illuminated jet bridge toward the aircraft. None of them know they are taking their final steps in the world. The passengers, a Malaysian grandfather in a beige cardigan, scrolls through a picture on his phone, a photograph of a newborn granddaughter he has never met. He smiles softly, rehearsing in his mind the words he'll use when he finally holds her. His excitement carries him through the fatigue of the late hour. A young couple, both photographers, compare the lenses in their backpacks as they wait in line. One of them insists Beijing's ancient architecture demands a wide-angle lens. The other argues for a telephoto. Their laughter rises and falls with the ease of people who believe the future is certain. Nearby, a group of Chinese students returning from a holiday chat quietly, their voices bubbling with leftover energy from their trip. They make plans for the upcoming semester, joking about professors, exams, and shared dorm rooms. Farther back, a business traveler rubs his temple as he reviews a presentation on his tablet. His eyes are tired, but his fingers scroll through the slides with mechanical focus. He just wants to get through this flight, land in Beijing, and finish the job waiting for him. Families, solo travelers, tourists, workers, friends, lovers all gathered here by coincidence, sharing this one stretch of time and space before their paths vanish into the unknown. The crew inside the aircraft, the cabin crew, prepares the cabin with quiet efficiency. Their movements are practiced and smooth, checking overhead bins, adjusting seatbelts, straightening blankets, reviewing safety equipment. In the cockpit, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah goes through his pre-flight procedures with calm confidence. He is experienced, meticulous, and steady. The kind of pilot passengers would feel instantly reassured by if they could see him. Beside him sits First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, young and eager. Still logging hours as he builds his experience on the Boeing 777. The aircraft systems hum to life around them. Screens glow softly, switches click. The aircraft seems to awaken, stretching out to prepare for the journey ahead. Outside the cockpit door, the last passengers board. Cabin bags thud gently into overhead compartments. Seatbelts snap into place. Few travelers close their eyes immediately, ready to sleep through the night flight. Everything feels routine, unremarkable. Just another departure into the night. But somewhere beyond the horizon lies an ocean darker and deeper than any place on Earth, and it is waiting. Pushed back, the jet bridge pulls away. The cabin doors seal shut. The aircraft rumbles as its engines begin to turn. MH370 pushes back from gate C1. Lights trace its outline as it begins the slow taxi toward the runway. The passengers settle into their seats as the engines grow louder, vibrating through the floor and armrests. The runway ahead glows like a silver path stretching into nothingness. The pilot advances the throttles. The engines roar. The aircraft surges forward. With a final breath of Kuala Lumpur's warm air, MH370 lifts off the ground and disappears into the night sky. Below, the lights of the city shrink and fade. Above, only darkness awaits. The aircraft climbs smoothly, its wings cutting through the humid night air. The world below becomes a patchwork of faint lights and shapes, then blurs into darkness as the plane reaches its cruising altitude. Inside the cabin, most passengers settle in for sleep. Blankets rustle, screens glow dimly, soft snores rise here and there. A flight attendant walks the aisle, checking seatbelts and offering gentle smiles. In the cockpit, the flight crew makes their final radio call to Kuala Lumpur. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those 6 words float through the airwaves, calm and familiar. They will be the last known words from the aircraft. Moments later, MH370 crosses a boundary in the sky and something changes. Not with noise, not with alarms, not with a struggle. Just silence. A silence that will echo across the world. Silence that will lead to the largest and most haunting search in aviation history. A silence the ocean will guard fiercely. The night swallows the aircraft whole. World below sleeps on, unaware that in this moment, 116 souls have slipped beyond the edge of certainty. The sky is dark, the sea is darker, and MH370 is gone. Chapter 1, boarding long before MH370 began taxiing toward its runway. The night at Kuala Lumpur International Airport unfolded like a slow-moving tide. People arrived in waves. Some rushed, some drifting, some half asleep, and some unaware that destiny was guiding them through automatic glass doors and into a place where time felt strangely detached from the outside world. The terminal glowed with white light, brighter than day, illuminating polished tile floors that reflected every movement like ghostly shadows. Travelers wheeled suitcases across the glossy surface. The echoes of rubber wheels and hurried footsteps carrying through the vast open hall. Screens flickered with flight numbers. Voices rose and faded. The air conditioning hummed with a steady, artificial coldness. And in the center of this sleepless world, at Gate C1, the story of MH370 quietly began its final chapter. Arrivals, a line formed slowly at the check-in counters. A mother guided her sleepy young daughter forward, whispering reassuringly while the child clung to a stuffed bear with threadbare ears. Behind them, an elderly couple leaned against one another for support. The woman gently rubbing circles on her husband's back while he fought a yawn. A man in a dark business suit stared up at the flight display, his eyes half-focused through exhaustion. He clutched a thin folder of documents to his chest like a lifeline. For him, this flight was another obligation, another demand from a company waiting for him on the other side of the world. Farther back in the line, a Malaysian university student refreshed her phone screen again and again, tracking the number of likes on a photo she had just posted. She wore headphones, bobbing her head faintly to music that only she could hear, isolating herself in a small, private universe of sound. Each person carried their own history, their own purpose, their own future that stretched far beyond the airport walls. But all futures would end the same way tonight. Security passengers passed through metal detectors one by one. A belt buckle beeped. A laptop tray slid across the rollers. Shoes thumped onto conveyor belts. The officers remained calm and expressionless, accustomed to the nightly flow of travelers. Nothing about the moment suggested anything out of the ordinary. It was just another procession, another choreographed dance of security routines, sterile lights, and shuffled plastic trays. People reassembled their belongings, slipped their shoes back on, and retrieved handbags, jackets, and devices. One by one, they stepped out into the airside corridors and toward Gate C1. the walk to the gate. The walk to the gate was long and quiet, lined with shops that were beginning to dim their lights as midnight approached. A perfume advertisement played on loop from a distant display, its music soft and repetitive, like a lullaby manufactured by machines. The scent of coffee drifted faintly from a kiosk where a lone barista wiped the counter, waiting for closing time. Passengers moved the terminal, the atmosphere changed. Crowds thinned. The echoes grew louder. The shadows deepened in corners where the light no longer reached. MH370 waited at the far end of a curved hallway, its gate surrounded by empty chairs and the quiet murmur of a handful of early arrivals. A soft voice over the public address system announced the flight, calm and measured, as though unaware of the weight those words would one day carry. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, now boarding. At the gate, the passengers gathered near the windows, looking out at the great sleeping aircraft resting under the floodlights. The Boeing 777 was enormous, its wings stretching like the arms of a giant across the tarmac. Its smooth, white surface gleamed under the lights, and its windows stared outward like dark, unblinking eyes. Some passengers paused to take photos, silhouettes of the plane in the night, small dots of light glinting from its windows. Others simply glanced once and looked away. The night outside seemed impossibly still. The sky was a deep, empty black. No stars visible. Just the faint orange glow of the city in the distance. Metal stairs clattered as airport workers inspected the aircraft from below. Fuel trucks sat idle. Luggage carts growled as they unloaded their cargo. Everything was ready. Everything felt normal. A normality that now feels impossible. The boarding line, the boarding process began with the familiar shuffle of people rising from seats, gathering their belongings, tightening straps on bags, adjusting coats, preparing to enter the confined ritual of air travel. The elderly grandfather stepped into line, his cardigan swaying gently as he moved. He carried a small gift bag inside it, a tiny stuffed panda for the granddaughter he had not yet met. The photographers stood behind him, whispering about their plans. One imagined capturing the first glimpse of Beijing at sunrise from the plane window. The other joked about sleeping through the entire flight and missing everything. The students joined the line with their backpacks hanging low, still laughing about a joke from moments before. They leaned into one another, their energy lively despite the hour. More travelers joined. A man carrying a bouquet of flowers wrapped in delicate paper, a woman in a red scarf, scrolling through a long message thread on her phone. A family with 3 children who clutched their parents' legs and looked around with wide, tired eyes. Step by step, the line moved forward. Passengers scanned their boarding passes. The machine beeped with each scan, a small electronic chirp echoing through the quiet gate. It was a sound that repeated dozens of times. A sound that would come to haunt investigators later, marking the last confirmed point each passenger passed before disappearing into the night. The jet bridge stretched toward the aircraft like a long enclosed tunnel suspended in the air. Travelers walked through it one after another, their footsteps muffled against the thin carpet. The walls vibrated faintly, resonating with the distant hum of the aircraft's systems powering on. The air inside the bridge smelled slightly metallic, mixed with the faint scent of engine fumes drifting in from outside. As each person reached the far end, the door to MH370 opened before them, the transition between the solid world of the terminal and the sealed, fragile world of the aircraft. One by one, they stepped aboard. Inside the cabin, warm yellow lights illuminated the cabin interior. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint smell of fresh upholstery and recycled air. Flight attendants greeted each passenger with practiced smiles, guiding them to their seats. The soft rustle of clothing, the thump of bags being lifted into overhead bins, and the murmur of tired voices filled the space. People settled into their seats. Seat belts clicked into place. Screens flickered on. Blankets were unfolded. Pillows were adjusted. A baby cried briefly, then quieted against its mother's shoulder. The cabin felt like its own small world, a floating village of strangers who would share the same air, the same space, the same trajectory through the night sky. The pilots prepared the cockpit. The crew secured the cabin. Passengers leaned back, preparing for rest. The door closed. The world outside faded. Match 370 was sealed, ready, waiting. suspended on the edge of the last moments before the unknown. Taxi to the runway. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, slow and deliberate, as if reluctant to leave. Yellow taxiway lights glowed against the darkness, guiding the massive machine across the tarmac like lanterns marking a path through a pitch-black forest. The engines grew louder, a deep, steady vibration pulsing through the floor. Wingtips glinted under the scattered lights, cutting shadows across the pavement. Inside the cabin, the lights dimmed. Passengers adjusted their blankets and leaned their heads against the windows or seat backs. Some whispered final messages to loved ones. Others closed their eyes, expecting nothing more than a routine flight and a quiet night's sleep. Outside, the runway stretched out ahead like a path disappearing into endless night. MH370 turned, aligned itself with the long strip of asphalt, and paused. A deep stillness fell over everything. Then the engine surged. Aircraft roared forward. The runway blurred beneath it. And in a single smooth motion, flight MH370 left the Earth behind and climbed into the darkness. It rose through the warm night air, lights flickering across its body as it ascended higher and higher, the world below shrinking into patterns of light and shadow. Moments later, the plane disappeared into the black sky, swallowed by the emptiness above the sleeping world. No one could imagine that this would be the last time the aircraft was ever seen. The night closed around it. The journey into the unknown began. Chapter 2, Routine Flight MH370 climbed through the humid Malaysian night, leaving behind the glowing sprawl of Kuala Lumpur. Faded quickly, swallowed by a black sky that stretched endlessly in all directions. Inside the cockpit, the glow of instrument panels reflected softly across the pilots' faces. Everything felt calm, predictable, ordinary. The aircraft leveled off, settling into its cruising altitude. The engines balanced into a steady, powerful hum. Autopilot engaged, holding the great machine on its pre-planned path toward Beijing. Outside the windows, there was nothing but darkness. No moon, no visible stars. Just the deep void of a night sky floating over an immense and unseen ocean. Inside the plane, lights dimmed. Cabin screens glowed gently. Passengers shifted into more comfortable positions. This was the quiet hour of flight, when the world seemed distant and unreal. Inside the cabin, flight attendants moved softly through the aisles, their steps light, careful not to disturb those who had already fallen asleep. A few overhead reading lights glowed like isolated stars scattered across a sky of seats. A woman in a red scarf scrolled through photos on her phone, smiling faintly at an image of her son. A young student leaned against the window and stared into the nothingness outside, her reflection faintly visible against the black void beyond the glass. She closed her eyes, imagining the sunrise she would see when the plane approached China. The elderly grandfather tucked the small panda gift bag beneath the seat in front of him, folded his hands, closed his eyes, and breathed slowly, picturing the moment he would finally hold his granddaughter. The photographers compared camera settings, speaking in hushed voices. Their excitement had dimmed into a calm, content buzz. They debated whether they'd stay awake to see the dawn from the air. A soft chime sounded through the cabin. Seatbelt signs remained off. All was peaceful. Passengers drifted deeper into rest. It felt like any other night flight over Southeast Asia. In the cockpit, the pilots monitored their instruments with quiet focus. Soft electronic beeps, faint radio static, and the low drone of the engines created a familiar, comforting soundscape. Captain Zahari reviewed the flight path displayed on the navigation screens, its thin magenta lines stretching across the digital map. Small green indicators blinked steadily, confirming the aircraft's systems were functioning normally. First Officer Farik made a routine check of the communications panel. They spoke casually, the kind of relaxed conversation that fills long flights when everything is running smoothly. Outside the cockpit windows, the world was pitch black, an endless silent expanse. At 1:19 a.m., Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control contacted the flight. It was the simplest of exchanges. Routine, forgettable. The captain replied with the final, confirmed words from MH370. Good night, Malaysian 370. The radio static faded, and then the skies went silent. The vanishing moments after that last transmission, something happened. Not a noise, not an alarm. not a sharp turn or a violent shudder that passengers could feel. Just a subtle shift. A quiet break in the chain of contact that should have continued uninterrupted. On the radar screens of air traffic control, MH370's signal blinked, then flickered, then vanished entirely. 1 second, the plane existed on their screens. The next, it was gone. But inside the cabin, nothing revealed the change. Passengers slept peacefully. The lights glowed softly. The engines hummed with steady, confident power. To those aboard, everything remained normal. The world outside the aircraft was empty and infinite. The aircraft pressed forward through the dark night without any sign that something had changed. Air traffic controllers attempted to reach the flight. No reply. They tried again. Silence. On another frequency. Silence. The night deepened, thick and impenetrable. The plane continued its course, but the link between the sky and the ground had broken. No one in the cabin stirred. No one sat up in alarm. No one knew that the aircraft had slipped into a kind of isolation that should have been impossible in the modern world. An aircraft full of people, a behemoth of metal and technology, a machine built to communicate across continents, was now alone in the sky, drifting through darkness without a voice. The unseen turned. While the world slept below, while the passengers breathed softly in their seats, something else occurred, something subtle, invisible from inside the cabin. The aircraft began to deviate from its planned path, turned slow, gradual, smooth enough that not a single sleeping passenger would have woken. The gentle banking motion of a plane turning is natural, familiar. Anyone awake might have assumed it was simply a part of the route, or a correction, or a change in direction due to air traffic. But this turn was not planned. MH370 was no longer flying toward Beijing. It was heading into darkness, heading toward unknown airspace, heading into a mystery that would haunt the world for years. The passengers remained unaware, their dreams carrying them far from the strange, silent shift taking place around them. The plane stabilized on its new course, moving deeper into the night. Still no radio calls, still no distress signals, still no indication of trouble, just silence, a silence that expanded with every passing second. Crossing the threshold, MH370 reached a point in the sky where radar coverage overlapped between Malaysia and Vietnam. It should have checked in. It did not. Controllers in Ho Chi Minh City waited for a call that never came. They attempted to hail the aircraft. No response. Minutes passed, then more. Silence persisted. Below, the earth lay in darkness. Lights from fishing boats speckled the water like faint stars. The ocean stretched endlessly, black and unknowable. The aircraft drifted above it, gliding through empty sky. Passengers slept. The cabin breathed with quiet, rhythmic calm. But somewhere in the unseen lines of communication, the link between MH370 and the world had broken in a way that should have been impossible. A plane cannot simply vanish, and yet, in this moment, it did. The uncertain sky far above the ocean, miles from land, far beyond the reach of anyone who could help. MH370 continued to fly with perfect mechanical grace. The wings sliced through pockets of cold air. The engines pulled the aircraft onward with unwavering strength. Lights shimmered softly along the fuselage. The outside, nothing looked wrong. Inside, everything seemed normal. But behind that thin shell of metal drifting through the night sky, a mystery was unfolding in absolute silence. A silence so deep that no one on Earth realized yet. That flight, MH370, had left the world of routine flight and crossed into something strange. It's unprecedented and utterly unexplainable. The night swallowed the aircraft whole. The sea waited beneath it like an endless mouth, and the world slept on, unaware that one of the greatest mysteries of the modern age had just begun. Chapter 3. The disappearance at first. No one on the ground noticed that MH370 was gone. The night shift at Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control moved through their routines with steady, practiced calm. Radar screens glowed softly in the dimly lit room, each display showing clusters of aircraft moving along their routes. Green blips drifted across the screens, each representing hundreds of lives soaring through the darkness. One of those blips was MH370, or at least it had been. The moment the aircraft crossed from Malaysian airspace toward Vietnam, its transponder signal should have handed off cleanly. Controllers expected a brief moment of overlap, then a routine confirmation call. Instead, the signal flickered, then vanished. The controllers waited. Aircraft sometimes drifted off radar for a moment, a shift in altitude, a technical hiccup, but they always came back. MH370 did not. The first call's Ho Chi Minh Control reached out to Kuala Lumpur. They asked if MH370 had checked in. It had not. They tried calling the aircraft themselves. No answer. Minutes ticked by, slow and heavy, like raindrops hitting a window in the middle of the night. The controllers exchanged glances, each one hoping someone else had an explanation. Another call was made. Still nothing. Silence had already wrapped itself around the aircraft, like a blanket of darkness falling over a candle flame. It was unusual, troubling. But in aviation, unusual moments often corrected themselves. The controllers told themselves to wait just a few more minutes, but those minutes stretched on with no change. Inside the cabin, passengers slept peacefully, oblivious to the quiet chaos forming thousands of feet below. The elderly grandfather shifted slightly in his seat, dreaming of the granddaughter he would never meet. The photographers slept leaning on each other's shoulders. The young mother tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. The engines hummed with perfect precision. Lights glowed faintly overhead. Shadows stretched gently across pillows and blankets. Nothing inside the cabin suggested anything was wrong. It was a small, sealed world moving through an unimaginable darkness. The growing concern Kuala Lumpur called the aircraft again. Nothing. Ho Chi Minh tried again. Nothing. The controllers spoke more urgently now, their voices steadier, but their eyes sharper. Flight going silent was never normal. They checked their radar systems. No signal from MH370's transponder. No secondary radar return. No altitude data. No identification code. Only one thing remained. A faint, untagged primary radar echo, a shadow moving without a name, and even that would soon drift away. The controllers repeated the calls, each one identical to the last, each one swallowed by the empty airwaves. Still no response. The turn no one saw while the world searched for MH370 on the wrong side of the sky, something happened far above the ocean and land below. The aircraft turned, not sharply, not violently, but slowly, steadily, like a giant drifting through the sky with purpose. Instead of continuing its path toward Beijing, the aircraft banked left, slipping back across the Malaysian peninsula it had just crossed. It moved in silence. It moved in darkness. It moved in a way that no one on Earth expected. Radar would later show this path, but in this moment, no one saw it. MH370 was flying west, not north, not east, west, back toward the mainland, back across the ocean and over the sleeping cities below. Its bright lights swept over fishing boats. Its shadow passed silently over islands and coastlines. Its engines echoed faintly through the darkness above small villages that never knew a missing aircraft was drifting overhead. And still, the plane remained silent. No distress call, no emergency signal, nothing, just a ghost moving across the sky. The controller's realization by now nearly 20 minutes had passed since the aircraft vanished from radar. Too long. Far too long. Controllers checked with neighboring countries. Thailand, Singapore, even Chinese radar stations. Nothing. No one had contact. No one had a signal. No one had a clue where MH370 was. The night shift began waking senior staff. Phones rang quietly in the darkness. Supervisors arrived half-dressed, their faces tense, their minds already racing. A flight had gone missing. Not crashed, not confirmed lost, just missing. A word far more frightening than any other in aviation. The vanishing blip on military radar, a faint, unidentified echo continued moving across the Malaysian peninsula. A ghost signal, drifting shape in the sky. But because no distress call had been received, and because the echo carried no identification code, no one connected it to MH370. It was dismissed as an unknown aircraft, nothing more. A haunting detail that would only be understood much later. As civilian radar lost track entirely, the aircraft passed over the mainland and continued southwest toward the dark waters of the Malacca Strait. The ocean beneath it was silent and vast. No ships in the immediate area, no eyes watching the sky, just the endless stretch of black water waiting with ancient patience. MH370 flew on. The world unaware in Beijing, airport staff prepared for an ordinary arrival. Families slept in hotels in anticipation of greeting loved ones the next morning. Taxi drivers prepared for the morning rush. A terminal display counted down the hours until MH370 was scheduled to land. In Malaysia, night shift workers refilled coffee cups and filed routine paperwork. The city slept under humid clouds, unaware that its plane had disappeared. China's early morning newspapers were being printed. Headlines about politics, sports, and business filled the pages. No one knew that every copy would soon become outdated by a single event that was unfolding even now. The world turned slowly in its sleep. No alarms had sounded, no statements had been released, no emergency plans activated. For now, the disappearance was known only to a handful of people in a quiet control room. But the silence from MH370 was growing heavier with every minute, silence that could no longer be dismissed. The first alarm when nearly half an hour passed with no communication, the controllers could no longer treat this as a temporary failure. They contacted Malaysia Airlines Operations Center. Voices grew tense, confusion spread through the room. An alert was raised. Not an emergency, not yet, but a warning. Something was wrong, something that made no sense, something that defied every expectation, something that had never happened before in quite this way. As the minutes stretched into nearly an hour, the truth began to dawn. MH370 was not missing because of a glitch. It was missing because it was gone. Gone from radar, gone from radio, gone from the known world. Somewhere in the sky above Southeast Asia, a Boeing 777 with 239 people aboard had vanished. No explosions seen, no wreckage found, no distress call heard, just an aircraft flying off the edge of certainty. A vanishing act performed in the real world in real time without any witness. And as the world slept on, the night swallowed the truth whole. Chapter 4. The First Search. Dawn had not yet touched the sky when the first threads of panic began to weave themselves into the early hours of March 8th. In Beijing, the airport's arrival boards glowed with soft blue light, their screens listing flight numbers, destinations, and expected times. Among them was one line of text that no one paid attention to yet, MH370 on time. At 6:15 a.m., families began gathering near the arrival hall, their faces warm with anticipation, sleepy but excited. A young woman held a bouquet of white lilies. A child clutched a handmade sign drawn in crayon, waiting for her father. A businessman checked his watch, calculating how long it would take to drive to the office after greeting his arriving colleague. None of them had any idea that MH370 was already hours late. No announcement had been made. No alarm had yet reached Beijing. The silence still held. But back in Kuala Lumpur, that silence had become unbearable. The alarms waked the world inside the air traffic control center. Supervisors gathered around screens filled with blank space where the aircraft should have been. Phone calls flew between departments. The words unresponsive, off radar, and no contact repeated again and again. Malaysia Airlines Operations attempted to send a message to MH370 through a CARS, the digital system that allowed aircraft to exchange information with the ground. No response. They tried again. Nothing. It was now clear that MH370's communication systems were no longer functioning or had been turned off. The supervisors' voices grew tighter. Their posture stiffened. The weight of responsibility settled into the room like a thick fog. A missing aircraft. The words no one wanted to say, whispered quietly at first, then louder. A missing aircraft. Malaysia Airlines contacted multiple regional authorities. Vietnam, Singapore, China, Thailand. Each one checked their skies. Each one found nothing. The flight had already crossed into ghosthood. Panic at the gates at the Beijing arrival hall. The clock clicked toward the scheduled landing time. 6:20 a.m. The display still showed on time because no one in Beijing knew the truth yet. No one wanted to announce something so unimaginable without confirmation. Then slowly, the screen flickered. Pixels shifted. The text changed. MH370 delayed. A few people frowned. Most shrugged it off. Flights were delayed all the time, but a delay meant the plane was somewhere. A delay meant it was still in the sky. A delay meant everything was fine. Minutes passed. Families waited. Another update appeared. MH370 awaiting information. Now the murmurs began. Confusion spread like ripples across still water. A man walked toward an airport attendant and asked quietly, "Is everything okay?" The attendant hesitated, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We are checking," she said softly. Something in her tone made the man's stomach drop. The false hope back in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia Airlines attempted to use an old emergency protocol, contacting the flight indirectly through any aircraft in its vicinity. Pilots of nearby flights were asked if they could reach MH370 on emergency frequencies. One after another, the pilots tried. Nothing. One aircraft reported hearing something faint, a static-filled fragment, a possible voice swallowed by noise. But it was too unclear to confirm, too ambiguous to trust, too fragile to hold. It would later be debated endlessly, but for now, it offered only the faintest sliver of hope, quickly crushed by the growing reality. MH370 was not responding because MH370 could not respond. The clock ticked on. Silence continued. The South China Sea awakens. Regional militaries began turning their attention to the skies. Vietnam launched patrol boats toward the last known location. Malaysia prepared aircraft for search missions. Fishermen along the coast were told to report anything unusual. Old radar logs were checked, files were opened, screens were analyzed again and again. But nothing pointed to a crash. No satellite distress beacon had been triggered. No flashes of light had been seen in the sky. No loud booms had been heard across coastal villages. The sea was calm, the sky was quiet, was as if the aircraft had dissolved into the night. Families began to sense the truth in Beijing. Families began to worry. Delayed, awaiting information. No landing announcement. An older woman whispered to her son, "It shouldn't take this long, should it?" He had no answer. The child tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Where is Daddy? Why isn't the plane here?" The mother forced a smile, blinking back tears she didn't understand yet. Airport staff grew restless. Supervisors called for emergency meetings. Security moved quietly into position. News agencies began to catch whispers. Rumors traveled faster than facts. Something was wrong. Badly wrong. The air changed, thickened, tightened, as if the entire terminal was holding its breath. The search begins at 7:24 a.m., nearly an hour after the scheduled landing time. Malaysia Airlines released a brief, chilling announcement to the world. The message was simple. Malaysia Airlines confirms that flight MH370 is missing. With those words, the world shifted. China launched search aircraft. Malaysia dispatched naval vessels. Vietnam deployed rescue teams. The United States moved a destroyer toward the region. The South China Sea became a grid of search patterns, each line cutting through uncertainty like a knife. Helicopters beat the sky, boats carved through waves. Radar screens refreshed again and again, hoping for a miracle that never came. The ocean gives nothing back. As the sun rose over the South China Sea, its golden light revealed calm waters stretching endlessly in every direction. No debris, no oil slick, no floating wreckage, nothing. It was as if the ocean itself was hiding the truth. Fishermen scanned the water with fearful eyes, expecting at any moment to see something, anything, a seat cushion, a life vest, a fragment of metal. But the sea remained still. The sky remained empty. The world remained confused. The search crews grew uneasy. The silence was unnatural. Even in disasters, the ocean usually whispered something, a clue, a trace, a story. But this time, it whispered nothing. MH370 had not crashed in the South China Sea. It had never even been there. The first suspicions by mid-morning, a troubling realization began to take shape in closed-door rooms. The aircraft should have sent automatic status messages through its ACARS system. But nothing had been received after 1:07 a.m. Radio silence was one thing. Disabled transponder was another. But ACARS going silent at the exact moment the aircraft turned away from its route. This was different, too precise, too deliberate, too controlled. Authorities didn't yet know what it meant, but they felt the weight of it. A shiver ran through the investigation teams. The aircraft hadn't simply disappeared. Something had happened to it. Something intentional. Something chilling. The day grows darker as news spread across the world. Panic grew. People rushed to airports. Phones rang with frantic voices. Governments demanded answers. Reporters filled television screens with speculation. But there were no answers. Only questions. Where was MH370? Why had it gone silent? Why had it never reached Beijing? Why had no trace been found? And above all, how does a Boeing 777 simply disappear? The first day of the search ended with no clarity, no debris, no signals, and no hope. Night returned. Darkness settled once again over the South China Sea. Teams continued searching under moonlight, their spotlights cutting pale paths across the water. But the ocean gave nothing. MH370 had vanished without a footprint. A disappearance unlike any other in modern aviation. A mystery that was only beginning. Chapter 5: The Radar Ghost. As the world searched tirelessly across the South China Sea, believing MH370 had crashed somewhere within its vast blue expanse, a discovery was quietly unfolding in a place no one had thought to look. A discovery that would change everything. In a small military facility in Malaysia, far from the cameras and the urgency, a lone radar technician studied the logs of the previous night. Each radar sweep had been preserved, each echo stored in the electronic memory of the system. He scrolled through the data methodically, expecting nothing unusual. He was not searching for MH370, he was simply reviewing routine activity. Then he saw it. A faint blip, unlabeled, unnamed, unidentified, moving west. The technician leaned closer, puzzled. Civilian radar had lost MH370 just east of the Malaysian coast, heading toward Vietnam. But this echo was doing the opposite. It was going the wrong way. He ran the sequence again. Same result. The unidentified object crossed the Malay Peninsula from east to west, slipping through airspace like a shadow, appearing and disappearing as the military radar scanned the sky and its path. Its altitude, its speed, it's all matched a Boeing 777. His breath caught slightly. This wasn't a random aircraft. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something else, something impossible. The meeting behind closed doors within hours, senior military officials gathered in a tension-filled room lit only by the glow of computer monitors. The technician replayed the radar sequence for them. A speck of light appeared on the right side of the screen. A ghostly echo. Weak, but there. Then it moved. The echo drifted westward across the country, following a slow but unmistakable arc. It was a path that no commercial flight should ever take. The officers stared, their expressions tightening. Someone finally whispered what they were all thinking. That's MH370. Silence filled the room like cold water. If this was MH370, then everything the world believed was wrong. The aircraft had not crashed in the South China Sea. It had turned around. It had flown over the entire country. Unannounced, unseen, silent, and it had done so after all communication systems went dark. The implications were chilling. But the radar trace did not end there. The echo continued across the Strait of Malacca, moving steadily until it faded into nothingness over the open ocean. Beyond that point, no one knew where the aircraft went. Match 370 had slipped into the void once more. The impossible turn investigators combined the radar data with known timing from the last civilian contact. The result was staggering. Just after saying goodnight, Malaysian 370, the aircraft should have flown straight toward Vietnam. But instead, it banked left. Not slightly, not drifting, not from turbulence, but with precision. A controlled, deliberate turn. A maneuver requiring intent, decision, and command. The aircraft flew southwest toward the island of Penang. It passed near the peninsula's edge. Lights from cities below may have glimmered faintly against its metallic skin. The engines hummed steadily as it sailed through the night. People sleeping in houses beneath it had no idea a missing aircraft was passing overhead. In the flight deck, someone guided it. Someone with knowledge, someone with purpose. The plane then curved north of Penang, following a strange, arcing route that matched no known flight path. It was as if the aircraft was tracing a farewell, a loop, a final circling of the captain's home region before heading back out to sea. Whether that gesture held meaning or was mere coincidence would become one of the most debated mysteries of the case. But the military officers watching the radar track did not concern themselves with symbolism. They saw something far more urgent and far more disturbing. Someone had been in control. The point of no return past Penang, the ghostly blip continued northwest. Its altitude fluctuated, sometimes descending, sometimes climbing. movements that made investigators uneasy. An aircraft in distress does not maneuver like this. A crippled plane does not execute sweeping turns. A doomed aircraft does not navigate with such precision. This was deliberate. This was guided. The radar track eventually stretched toward the open ocean, past Malaysia's borders, past the reach of their systems, past the safety of known routes. When the track finally disappeared, it vanished into nothing but empty air. No country's radar picked up the signal afterward. No military reported a sighting. No ships reported an aircraft overhead. The radar ghost had slipped into a region of sky where few things ventured at that hour. The darkness swallowed it whole. The world learns the truth. When Malaysia finally revealed this radar discovery to the international community, the reaction was swift and disbelieving. How could a commercial airliner reverse its direction without anyone noticing? How could it cross a country unnoticed? How could it slip past radar systems built to detect threats? And above all, why? Why would MH370 abandon its route and head west? Why would its transponder be turned off? Why would its radio go silent? Why would its car system stop transmitting? Questions outnumbered answers. Speculation spread like wildfire, hijacking pilot action. Mechanical failure, followed by human intervention. A fire that disabled communications. Sudden crisis, forcing the aircraft to turn back. Every theory was discussed. Every possibility weighed. But the radar track told them only one undeniable truth. MH370 had not vanished instantly. It had not crashed early. It had not been lost in the South China Sea. It had been flying for another hour, maybe longer, in silence, in the dark, beyond the reach of the world. The westward search begins. Search teams shifted their focus. Ships and planes were redirected from the South China Sea toward the Strait of Malacca and the Andaman Sea. The area was enormous. The ocean deep and uncooperative. Debris, none. Oil slicks, none. Signals, nothing. The radar ghost had not left a physical trail. It was like chasing the shadow of something long gone. Still, search crews combed the waters. They listened for underwater beacons. They scanned for metal fragments, watched for anything out of place. Hours turned into days, days into nights. Exhaustion gnawed at everyone involved. But the ocean remained blank and cold. The ghost left no fingerprints. A disturbing realization as investigators pieced together timelines. One realization chilled them more than any other. The turn happened exactly when communications ceased. Not minutes later. Not by accident. Not at random. The silence and the turn were paired events. The moment MH370 stopped talking, it changed direction. This was no coincidence, it was an act. The only question was, whose act? A hijacker, a rogue passenger, a deliberate action by someone in the cockpit, a chain reaction of failures. The speculation intensified, and nothing was ruled out. But the radar ghosts provided only motion, not motive, not meaning, not answers, only a path. A lonely, impossible path across the sky. The world watches in fear. Television screens across continents displayed maps with jagged lines sweeping westward. Families clung to hope with trembling hands. Officials stood in front of microphones, speaking carefully, cautiously, their eyes heavy with uncertainty. The story no longer made sense. The pieces did not fit. The world had lost a plane, and now it seemed they had found a phantom in its place. One journalist said it best, "It is as if MH370 became a ghost aircraft, moving through the night with purpose, then vanishing into a place where the sky has no witnesses," and that description stuck. Because it felt true, MH370 was no longer simply missing. It was haunting the world. The final shock of the day. Late that night, investigators made one final discovery from the radar data. After turning west, MH370 did not fly straight into the Indian Ocean. It followed a strange looping curve north of the Strait of Malacca. A curve consistent with someone navigating, someone controlling, someone guiding the aircraft along a path known only to them. Then it turned once more. Southwest this time. A final shift. A direction that led toward the emptiest part of the Indian Ocean. A place beyond radar, beyond radio, beyond rescue. A place where no one would see what happened next. A place where a secret could be buried forever. Chapter 8. The families and the aftermath. The world had seen the plane vanish. Radar had lost it. Satellites had traced its final arc. The southern Indian Ocean had swallowed it without a trace. But for the families, none of that mattered. The cold mathematics of flight paths and pings did not comfort the empty seats at dinner tables. The missing luggage, the unmade beds, quiet bedrooms, where loved ones would never return. The family's vigil in Beijing, parents paced hotel lobbies, clutching phones that would not ring. Children asked questions that had no answers. Couples stared blankly at arrival boards. Every delayed update was a fresh wound. In Kuala Lumpur, families waited outside Malaysia Airlines offices, seeking something tangible, anything to cling to. Every announcement from the airline brought a shiver of hope, immediate despair. The words were formal, clinical, carefully chosen, but they carried no comfort. They had lost more than a flight. They had lost certainty. They had lost trust. They had lost control. Some prayed quietly in hotel rooms. Some refused to leave. Some collapsed under the weight of despair, supported only by the hands of strangers. The global reaction, the disappearance of MH370, became a media event unlike any other. News broadcasts around the world ran updates continuously. Satellite diagrams and radar tracks were displayed on television screens. Analysts spoke in hypotheticals, theories, and probabilities. Governments scrambled to explain what had happened. Investigations were launched. International aviation authorities convened emergency meetings. Every airline reviewed its protocols. Every flight across the region was suddenly under scrutiny. The world, once casual about air travel, became anxious. A Boeing 777 did not simply vanish, yet this one had, and no one could explain it. The emotional toll months passed. Families endured waiting rooms, meetings with officials, briefings that offered hope, then dashed it. They were told that some debris might eventually be found, that satellites had given clues, that oceans are vast and unpredictable. Every shred of hope was balanced by despair. Every sighting of wreckage that did not belong to MH370 tore at their hearts. The uncertainty became a constant companion. Psychologists described it as ambiguous loss, a grief without closure, a wound that never healed. The political fallout. Malaysia faced criticism from every direction. Questions about preparedness, communication, and transparency dominated headlines. Reports emerged of delayed alerts, miscommunication, and lost radar data. International pressure intensified. China demanded explanations. Australia coordinated the search effort. Other nations offered assistance. The world expected answers. The Malaysian government struggled to provide any that satisfied. A cloud of mistrust formed. And for many, the mystery of MH370 became symbolic of failure of technology, of planning, and of human comprehension. The search continues even years after the disappearance. The search persisted. Ships combed areas of the southern Indian Ocean, guided by satellite arcs, drift patterns, and oceanographic models. Pieces of debris were occasionally found on distant shores. A flaperon here, a fragment of interior panel there. Each discovery confirmed the aircraft had reached the ocean, but none revealed the final moments aboard. The southern Indian Ocean remained a vast, unforgiving landscape. Its storms and currents erased almost all traces of the aircraft. The exact resting place of MH370 remained unknown, a ghostly secret beneath layers of water and pressure. The questions left behind who had been in control during the aircraft's final hours. What occurred in the cockpit after communications ceased? Were the passengers aware of what was happening? Is it mechanical failure, human error, or something deliberate? No definitive answers emerged. Investigators could only speculate. Every theory carried contradictions. Every scenario left gaps. The mystery of MH370 had become a riddle the world could not solve. The legacy of the flight MH370 reshaped aviation. Every airline reviewed emergency protocols. New satellite communication systems were proposed. Tracking methods for aircraft were revised. Flight crews received additional training for rare but catastrophic scenarios. The world learned to respect the limits of technology. The world learned that even in the modern age, machines, oceans, and chance could combine to erase entire lives from the sky without warning. Yet the story of MH370 was more than a technical puzzle. It was a human story. a story of hope, despair, and unanswered questions. A story that reminded the world of its vulnerability. The final reflection in the southern Indian Ocean, waves continue to crash, winds continue to howl. MH370 rests somewhere beneath, swallowed by darkness, pressure, and time. No cameras will see it. No radar will trace it. No human voice will hear it. But the plane lives on in the memory of those it carried, in the satellite shadows that marked its path, in the radar ghost that traced its impossible turn, in the waves that hide it forever. MH370 is gone from the sky, gone from the world of the living, but it remains in human consciousness. Chapter 9: Theories and Speculation. The disappearance of MH370 has defied explanation. Years have passed, debris has been found, satellite arcs have been analyzed, investigations have been exhaustive, yet certainty remains elusive. In the absence of facts, speculation thrives. Human imagination fills the void left by silence. Theories arise, some plausible, some improbable, some chilling. Mechanical failure, the simplest explanation, is mechanical failure. A catastrophic event, such as fire, decompression, or electrical failure, could have disabled communications. But the data from satellites contradicts this. The aircraft flew for hours after systems went silent. A completely uncontrolled plane would not maintain steady flight for 7 hours. It would not navigate across airspace with precision. The mechanical failure theory explains the silence, but cannot explain the continued deliberate path. Mechanical failure hijacking a hijacking has been widely considered. The deliberate turn, the disabling of communication systems, the controlled flight into the southern Indian Ocean, these suggest human intervention. Who could have done it? A passenger? A member of the crew? Experts argue that the cockpit alone had the ability to control the aircraft. Could someone have taken command? Could someone have intended to disappear entirely? No evidence has ever confirmed a hijacking. No terrorist group claimed responsibility. No note, no message, no signal ever surfaced. Yet the theory persists because deliberate action fits the known facts better than almost any other. Pilot involvement. Some investigators have speculated about the pilot's role. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah had flown MH370 thousands of times. He knew the aircraft intimately, could execute a turn and a long flight without detection. Did he intend to disappear? Did he plan it? Or was the final flight a desperate response to a personal crisis? No conclusive evidence exists. Some digital records suggest pre-flight simulations with unusual routes. Some behavioral studies have raised questions, but nothing proves intent. Fire or cabin emergency, another theory suggests an onboard emergency. Smoke, fire, or sudden decompression could have incapacitated passengers and crew. The autopilot could have maintained flight while the aircraft continued to travel west. The eventual fuel exhaustion would explain the final descent into the southern Indian Ocean. This theory accounts for continued flight without communication, but fails to explain why the aircraft deviated sharply from its route. Why turn? Why head to the southern Indian Ocean instead of continuing to Beijing? The ocean remains silent. The passengers remain unheard. The truth remains invisible. Other speculations. Other explanations have been floated. Hijacking by unknown parties. Cyber interference with flight systems. Combination of mechanical failure and human error. Even more extreme ideas suggest international conspiracy or secret military action. Most are improbable. Some are impossible. But in a case defined by absence, every theory is considered. Every shadow of possibility is weighed, because the silence demands it. Why the southern Indian Ocean? No one knows why MH370 ended up there. Was it intentional? Was it an accident? Was it simply the last place the aircraft could fly before fuel ran out? The southern Indian Ocean is isolated. It is stormy. It is deep. It is a graveyard that consumes everything and reveals nothing. For investigators, pilots, and families, the location compounds the mystery. The exact point where MH370 rests may never be found. Its secrets may never be recovered. The human cost the theories, however elaborate, cannot capture the human element. 239 lives were aboard MH370. They were fathers, mothers, children, siblings, friends. Their absence left voids in countless hearts. Their loss reshaped families, communities, and careers. Speculation cannot heal the grief. It cannot replace a life. It cannot answer the simplest question: what happened to them in the final hours? The legacy of mystery MH370 has left a lasting mark on aviation, on safety procedures, and on the human imagination. It has taught the world about the fragility of technology, the limits of human knowledge, the vastness of the oceans, the impossibility of certainty. It has shown that even in a world saturated with satellites, radars, and instant communication, something can vanish without a trace. And when it does, the only things that remain are shadows, traces, echoes. Speculation, MH370, is both a story of technology and a story of human loss. A story of silence, a story that asks questions the world cannot answer, and a story that will linger forever in the dark reaches of the southern Indian Ocean, in the satellite shadows and in the hearts of those left behind. Chapter 10. The enduring mystery, MH370, is gone. Radar lost it. Satellites traced it. The southern Indian Ocean swallowed it. Debris washed up on distant shores. Yet the answers remain elusive. The world has learned to accept facts without certainty, to live with questions that have no answers, to acknowledge the limits of human understanding in a universe that is indifferent, vast, and unforgiving. The silence that remains, the aircraft rests in darkness. Deep beneath crushing pressure, far from sunlight, far from human eyes. The ocean, endless and impartial, holds it tightly. It will protect its secret. It will erase almost all traces. It will leave only fragments, whispers, and shadows. The silence is absolute, a silence that reflects human limits. A silence that humbles technology, strategy, and intellect. MH 370's last moments are known only to those who were aboard. The engines hummed. The autopilot guided. Passengers slept. The final descent approached, and then nothing. The enduring questions: who was in control during the final hours? What prompted the turn to the west? Was it deliberate? Was it accidental? Was it fate? What were the passengers thinking, feeling, fearing? No one will ever know. No evidence can fully answer. Every answer remains speculative, fragile, incomplete. The questions themselves have become a part of the legacy of MH370. The mystery is inseparable from the story, and perhaps that is the only truth that survives. For the families, for the investigators, for the world, MH370 remains alive in memory. The flights route across radar screens, the pings from satellites, the debris discovered far from the aircraft's resting place, the press conferences, the speculation. Every detail is a fragment of understanding, a trace of existence, a human attempt to make sense of the incomprehensible. The story of MH370 is not just about a plane. It's about loss. It's about hope. It's about the need for answers even when the universe offers them. The lessons learned: MH370 reshaped aviation forever. Tracking systems were rethought, emergency protocols revised, communication standards improved. Pilots trained for scenarios previously unimagined. Yet the greatest lesson lies beyond technology. It is a lesson about humility, about limits, about the realization that some mysteries remain because the world itself allows them to. The haunting legacy MH370 haunts the imagination. It is a ghost in the sky, a shadow in the ocean, a story told in pieces of debris, in satellite echoes, in radar blips, and in memories. It is a reminder of fragility, of unpredictability, of silence, of the infinite complexity of a world that refuses simple answers. In every ocean wave, in every gust of wind over the southern Indian Ocean, the story persists. A bowing 777, 239 souls, and a path traced only by shadows. A story that the world cannot close, cannot resolve, and cannot forget. The final reflection. MH370 will never land in Beijing. Its passengers will never return to their families. Its engines will never hum again. Yet it remains in memory, in speculation, the deep dark waters, in every lesson learned, in every story told. MH370 is more than a missing aircraft. It is a mystery that endures. It's a silent testament to human vulnerability, resilience, and the eternal question. What really happened in the last hours of flight MH370? Perhaps some questions are meant to remain unanswered. The plane rests. The ocean waits. The world remembers. The mystery endures. Flight MH370 remains a story without a final chapter, a reminder of how vast our world truly is, how quickly certainty can turn into silence. Though years have passed, the questions still echo across the waves, and the truth still sleeps somewhere in the deep. If you found this journey compelling, I invite you to support Lost at Sea Tales by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who appreciates stories that dive into the unknown. Your support helps me create more long-form, atmospheric explorations of the world's most haunting disappearances, shipwrecks, and unsolved mysteries. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the ocean keeps its secrets. But here, we dive deep to uncover them.